Israel is in trouble. A leaked report paid for by the Israeli government themselves shows that the majority of people in Western nations think that Israel has been killing civilians, not Hamas, for the last 2 years. And Israel's response to this is not to confess and to start to adhere to the truth. It's to spend more money to control the media and to make more propaganda. Now, if you're like me, you want real news. You want the truth. You want a free marketplace of ideas where people can share things and let the best argument win. But that's not what Israel or their Zionist supporters across the world want. In fact, they want to control information and to censor the truth. And they also want to smear and cancel anybody who stands in their way. And we saw this very, very recently with our dear brother Sami Hamdi, one of the latest victims of this campaign, where they drummed up some fears about Sami, made a bunch of lies, insinuated some things about him, and he was detained by ICE. Thankfully, now he's free. Now, what we're going to go through today, we're going to uncover, by the end of this episode, just how badly Israel has alienated the entire world when it comes to what they've been up to, especially the last 2 years. Also, what's their next move? Who are the shady figures who got Sami arrested, who drummed up all of the scare tactics against them? And who's the network of funding that put them up to it? Let's go back to this report. This is issued by Dropsite News. The Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs commissioned an American polling firm named Stagwell to perform a sweeping battery of surveys and focus groups coupled with message testing aimed at rehabilitating Israel's image in both the US and Europe. So they realized that they have a major credibility problem, and so they hired out this organization that does this thing in order to give them information. The survey asked people in the United States, Germany, the UK, Spain, and France how many people they believed Israel had killed in Gaza, and what portion of those people were civilians. Respondents in all of the countries overwhelmingly said that those killed were, quote, mostly civilians. The research found that Europeans in particular, quote, agree with the language of Israel being a genocidal apartheid country, end quote. That's not my language. That's the language of Stagwell, this company that the Israeli Foreign Ministry hired to tell them and to break them the bad news of the absolute collapse of their credibility. But Israeli propaganda is not yet defeated. The last several years have shown that pro-Israeli actors have consolidated ownership over the legacy media, and the result has been narratives and media coverage that aligns with Israeli interests. We're going to go into that more now. And after we go into that, we're also going to see how the new generation of social media influencers is something that Israel is weaponizing in order to push its propaganda, and how that particular network of actors was responsible for the campaign against Sami. Now, let's go back to 2013. Jeff Bezos from Amazon acquires the Washington Post. Now, what does that have to do with Israel and Zionism? If you're unaware, Amazon actually provides the infrastructure for genocide. And stay tuned, because there's something that you might use in your own home that is developed by the same technology that was tested out on Palestinians that comes from Amazon. And if you have that in your home, I would suggest that you get rid of it. But let's go back first. So Amazon has this part of it, which is Amazon Web Services, usually shorthanded as AWS. In 2021, AWS signed a $1.2 billion contract with the Israeli government alongside Google. This was known as Project Nimbus, and it promised vast amounts of cloud storage, AI tools, and analytics to the Israeli government and military. Amazon Web Service servers stored the intelligence that guided bombing runs and tracked entire populations that were under occupation. AI programs like Lavender and Gospel were reported to generate kill lists of individual target recommendations, and they were processed through the Nimbus servers. So all of the data that the Israeli military required was all stored on Google and especially Amazon cloud services. The cloud infrastructure is what allowed the Israeli military to ingest and to analyze vast amounts of data, satellite imagery. They intercepted communications. They took drone footage, facial recognition records. All of this stuff has to be stored somewhere. and Amazon was a key player in storing it there. Now, Amazon has a subsidiary that you're maybe familiar with if you have any home security system. If you've heard of Ring, okay, and Ring is probably the most popular home security system when it comes to cameras, and it syncs with your doorbell, and you can get the app on your phone and see who's at your house or in front of your house while you're away. Well, Ring is a subsidiary of Amazon, and Ring uses technology. It uses technology that was built based off of the experience of the Israeli government in Palestine. The same technologies that human rights groups warn are used to monitor and control Palestinians. So Ring markets surveillance tools that are built on the same technologies that human rights groups warn are used to monitor and control Palestinians. Now, how does this connect back to the media? So Amazon provides all this cloud service to the Israeli military. They enable, again, the infrastructure of genocide. I think it's a pretty compelling and powerful phrase, that Amazon provides the infrastructure for the genocide. Well, if Israel is your top customer and you're Jeff Bezos and you have your Amazon Web Services and you also own the Washington Post, there's a conflict of interest here. How are you going to potentially view your top customer being treated in the media? And we'll talk about the incentives and how incentives align when it comes to narrative selection and different things in the media. But we see that there's a conflict of interest here, that if your top customer is Israel, then you have a disincentive to report on them in any sort of negative way. But it doesn't stop there. That was just one example. We can go through several. Politico is one, and I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, I used to read Politico online. Recently, within the last probably 3 years, I went back and I looked, and it was unrecognizable. The type of coverage, the types of narratives that were being spun, I didn't see the Politico that I had come to associate in my head. It was something completely different. Well, apparently there's a reason for that. In 2001, in October, Politico was taken over by a group from Germany called Axel Springer. It was sold for acquired for over $1 billion. And the parent company actually is very explicit about their essentials. You can look this up online. It's on their own website. One of their essentials is, quote, "We support the Jewish people and the right of existence of the state of Israel." The media has covered the conflict of interest between Axel Springer and hence Politico, and when it comes to covering the genocide. So fair.org has run articles. Also, The Telegraph has run an article, the headline of which Politico owner's director attacks, quote unquote, woke journalists over Gaza bombing article. So you've got somebody who is on the board of Axel Springer, and a journalist for Politico actually ran an article that was somewhat sympathetic to Palestinians, somewhat critical of Israel, and the board member goes to the media and basically criticizes this type of coverage, claiming that that type of coverage amounted to support for Hamas. You can't make this stuff up. So again, even though that demonstrates that media companies are contested territories, that it's not necessarily so top-down and centralized that if the owner of a media corporation happens to be extremely pro-Israel or pro-Zionist, that doesn't mean that every single person underneath of them is in lockstep always reasserting that. But it does mean that there is a slant. And I think in cases like Politico, it's very obvious if a board member is going to complain about a journalist's coverage, I wonder what happened to that journalist. Was he able to stay around, or was he fired eventually, or did he just quit in frustration? Because it doesn't feel good to be undermined by your boss. Let's go now to CBS/Paramount Global, formerly Viacom. Viacom used to be a very notorious organization, so they had a little bit of a glow up, and they call themselves Paramount now. Now listen to this. The parent company here is National Amusements, that's run by the Redstone family, especially Shari Redstone. The Redstone Family Foundation, led by Shari, has recently directed $101 million in new giving in the wake of October 7th attacks, quote, to support Israel's resilience. Shari Redstone also is heavily invested in Israeli entertainment and film industry. She runs a studio called Sipor. She's the chair of the board. And recently, in October of 2025, Paramount Global did something very controversial, which was hire Barry Weiss to be their editor-in-chief of CBS News. So why is this controversial? Who is Barry Weiss? This was part of a merger, and we're going to take our time and pull the threads here because there's a lot going on. So on October 6th, 2025, Paramount Global merges with Skydance Media. Remember those two names, Paramount and Skydance. And in the process, they acquire Barry Weiss's own company called the Free Press. Just go do a quick Google search on the Free Press and look what type of coverage that they have in there. The Free Press is not a old institution by any stretch of the imagination. They were only founded in 2021. But anyway, the Free Press gets acquired. Barry Weiss skips several steps in the corporate structure and goes to be the editor-in-chief of CBS News. Now, why that's a little bit weird, first of all, is because a huge company like Paramount has both broadcast media and also traditional legacy media like print media. And Barry Weiss doesn't really have a lot of experience in both of those fields. So it's kind of already red flags, and people have commented about this. Like, how could this person who doesn't really have the requisite experience to have this role, all of a sudden they get promoted? Well, it turns out the Financial Times reported on why, and part of why she was hired was due to her, quote, vocally pro-Israel stance, despite the lack of her experience or her lack of experience in broadcast news. Now, let's go back to talk about that merger, because who is Skydance and how does this all fit in? David Ellison founded Skydance Media. David Ellison is the son of Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is the founder of Oracle. And Larry Ellison is the single largest private funder of the IDF. And of course, now he's got ties to the ownership of CBS. So Larry, the father, essentially financed this merger. At the end of it, it was a good deal for his family. His son David ends up coming out as the chairman and CEO of the new corporation. And the Ellison family and all of their entities in aggregate end up having over 70%, a controlling interest in this new merged company. So if you happen to have a Paramount subscription, you might want to reconsider at this point. I used to have a Paramount subscription back in the day when I used to watch soccer / internationally known as football. But I haven't been able to bring myself to watch since October 7th. I'm not sure about you. Now, what's more, it doesn't stop there. So David Ellison's company, Skydance, after the merger, is in the process of attempting to acquire Warner Brothers, specifically Warner Brothers Discovery. And Warner Brothers Discovery owns CNN. So you've got CBS and CNN and all the other subsidiaries and brands of the Paramount mega group owned by people who are ardent supporters and funders of Israel. Let's move on to Fox Corporation, and this one is very familiar. Now, Fox has sort of like a dual structure where they've got Fox Corporation, which deals with broadcast media, television media, and then News Corp, which is in print. Obviously, it's well known at this point that the Murdoch family is the one who runs these corporations, both the father, Rupert Murdoch, who is infamous, and his son Lachlan, and Lachlan seems like he's going to take over the empire. So Rupert is very, very notorious for his support of Israel. At a December 2024 event, he said that Israel, quote, has been leading the charge on the front line of Western democratic civilization, end quote. He also received an award from the ADL in 2010. Wow. And he said, quote, I will not second guess the decisions of a free Israel defending her citizens. So you know what to expect with that type of ownership at the top. Now, who else? The Wall Street Journal. They own the Wall Street Journal. They also own the Times of London. And finally, the notorious rag, the New York Post. The same New York Post who ran very virulent anti-Islamic and anti-Muslim articles and headlines against Mamdani throughout the Mamdani campaign in New York City that have criticized and targeted virtually every Muslim leader in America at this point. I mean, Imam Siraj Wahaj, who is a legend in the community, they called him an unindicted co-conspirator, terror-linked, and we're going to get into this language later. This is always sort of the same vague accusations. It sounds so horrible. An unindicted co-conspirator. Homie, if you're unindicted, it means you haven't done anything wrong. So all of these very, very scary sounding things, and it's up to them to call someone terror-linked, and you're terror-linked, and everybody else is terror-linked just because the New York Post said so. Now, let's get something straight. Some people might say, okay, well, owning media does not guarantee direct editorial control of every single story that is published on that platform. And that's true. That is true. Nobody is claiming that. But it does set incentives. And it also sets staffing norms, and it sets board appointments and overarching strategic direction. It does influence what is covered, how deeply it's covered, and what gets omitted. And that's not a wild conspiracy. That's actually documented fact. So let's get into some of the results. How do we know that this isn't just a conspiracy? Oh my gosh, is this anti-Semitic? Oh my gosh, is this, are you guys bigots? You're claiming some sort of global conspiracy. No, this is documented fact. In 2024, Adam Johnson for The Intercept ran an analysis evidence of media bias. And there's other ones. Al Jazeera did a more in-depth one. There are other ones that have gone on for longer, but we don't want to be accused of being Qatari agents just for citing Al Jazeera. So we're going to go with The Intercept. They demonstrate and document the media slant. There's a disproportionate emphasis on Israeli deaths. They found that the language used when it's talking about Israeli deaths are always very emotive, but never for Palestinians. So for example, highly emotive terms such as slaughter and massacre and horrific, they're almost exclusively reserved for talking about Israelis who are killed by Palestinians rather than the other way around. And we've got numbers. We're going to get into the numbers. The term slaughter was used by editors and reporters to describe the killing of Israelis versus Palestinians 60-1. Okay? 60-1. And the word massacre was used to describe the killings of Israelis versus Palestinians 125-2. That means that for every one time a Palestinian's death at the hand of an Israeli is described as a slaughter, they've already described 60 times of an Israeli dying at the hands of a Palestinian. And the same for, as we said, the word massacre, and the same also for horrific. The word horrific was used to describe the killing of Israelis versus Palestinians 36-4. Okay, so there's no excuse for that type of imbalanced coverage. That shows an ideological affiliation and very, very selective framing. Now, looking specifically at the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the LA Times, the word Israeli or Israel appear in any form more than the word Palestinian or any associative language. For every two, get this, listen to this, for every 2 Palestinian deaths, Palestinians are only mentioned one time. Okay? That's how valuable their lives are, according to these newspapers, by extension, that for every 2 Palestinians that die, they're only mentioned once. You could say that they're worth half of a person. Whereas for every single Israeli death that is reported upon, Israelis are mentioned 8 times. Every single Israeli that is killed, they are mentioned 8 times. That's a conversion rate of 16 times more. So an Israeli death will be covered 16 times more than a Palestinian death. You cannot tell me that this is not a conspiracy. You cannot tell me that this is not the result of a clear, again, maybe not every single person being under control, but yes, that there's a large guiding framework and ideology that is resulting in this. Overall, there was a disproportionate focus on attacks towards Jewish people instead of Muslims, Arabs, or those perceived as such. We're talking about now here. What about how attacks are covered in America? Is the most significant thing that the United States is dealing with right now, is it anti-Semitism, or is it something else? Is it the affordability crisis? Is it violence against Muslims and Arabs? Well, if you would believe the news, then these news corporations would have you believe that the most important and the most prevalent thing going on is anti-Semitism, that there's a disproportionate focus on attacks towards Jewish people as opposed to others, including Muslims, Arabs, or those perceived as such. During the period of the Intercept study, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the LA Times mentioned anti-Semitism more than Islamophobia at a rate of 549-79. So that's a raw count, 549 versus 79. And what's crazy is in doing the research for this episode, like I went into, if you're going around the internet, you will find lots of hue and cry and accusations that the media is biased against Israel, that poor Israel, they're just defending themselves. They're just doing what any nation has the right to do. And, oh, these media corporations and journalists are just, they have it in for Israel and they have such a negative view and it's all anti-Semitism. That if you go like honest reporting, right? And many of these things are just gaslighting and psyops and SEO manipulation. You see that some of the top ranked Google searches on these things will actually accuse the media of being against Israel when we have documented numbers that demonstrate how the legacy media has completely lined up, with a few exceptions here and there. But in general, the gist, the overall direction and thrust of the legacy media is that it lines up behind Israel and gives it political cover and legitimacy. But that shouldn't be a big deal, should it? Because it's 2025. People my age and younger do not get their news anymore from the legacy media. We're not reading the New York Times. At least I sure as heck don't. We get our news from social media. So shouldn't we be happy that, everything now is going to be solved? not so fast. Israel and Israeli actors, Zionists across the world, have been moving to consolidate ownership of social media and influence social media influencers in the same way that they've done with the legacy media. Let's go back to Larry Ellison. Remember Larry Ellison, the billionaire founder of Oracle? Well, recently he effectively purchased not just CBS, but TikTok as well. TikTok, which was one of the main drivers behind people becoming exposed to what's really going on at the ground, or what's really going on the ground in Palestine and in Gaza, because it was not filtered by this ecosystem of control and propaganda and intimidation. Well, you heard not too long ago the government and people getting all up in arms and in a huff because this was Chinese propaganda and China is going to do this and that, and this is a national security threat. Well, I think everybody's figured out by now that it was never really about China. It was really about Israel. And what they were concerned about was they were concerned about the truth of what's going on in Palestine and Gaza getting out. And so they used China as a convenient fall guy, a convenient scapegoat to justify the purchase of how TikTok is going to operate within the US. Now, technically, the official language is that they are acquiring TikTok's US operations and will have a significant role in security and auditing TikTok's algorithm. So they're going to be but there's no conspiracy, right? They are going to be auditing TikTok's algorithm. It's not just Larry Ellison alone. There are other investors, including Ben Horowitz, who is the son and heir to David Horowitz of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, the guy who brought you the term Islamofascism, which now nobody uses because it's fake. It's been fake news, and it always was fake news. And we'll talk more about understanding the David Horowitz Freedom Center is actually key to the next segment of this program, which is illustrating the handoff, the intergenerational handoff that is currently taking place between old forms of media, legacy media, and the new social media, and how Israel is attempting to control the narrative, spread its propaganda, spread its lies, and also to tar and feather and smear and intimidate and deport, if necessary, to ruin and cancel anybody who attempts to stand in their way. So the David Horowitz Freedom Center is a key player in this intergenerational handoff. They have a history, a very, very robust history of recruiting and funding and training individuals for anti-Islamic propaganda. And anti-Islamic propaganda is by default, pro-Israeli propaganda as well. One of the findings from the study that the Israeli Foreign Ministry illustrated was that the most effective messaging, by far, that they tested out on populations, again, in France, Germany, UK, Spain, and the US, the most effective messaging to get people to sympathize with Israel a little bit, despite seeing all the children being starved and bombed and beheaded and amputated, the only message that can kind of make people a little bit sympathetic towards Israel is to scream Islamic terrorism, 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 terrorism here, terrorism there, terrorism everywhere. That's the only thing that they have left. And so this plays very much into the David Horowitz Freedom Center as they train individuals in this type of propaganda. The David Horowitz Freedom Center, we'll call it, I guess, DHFC for short, because I don't want to repeat that phrase, has supported Geert Wilders, okay, the far-right Dutch politician, and funneled money to his campaign. They also, so the DHFC gets a lot of funding from U.S. tech billionaire, Zionist Robert Shillman. Robert Shillman is an extremely important person if you've been following what's been going on with Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk. I'll say that in just a second. But for now, Robert Shillman has his own fellowship at the David Horowitz Freedom Center that he sponsors, right? So he's organized his money, he pays people, and we're going to go through some of the characters that they have recruited and paid in order to train them in anti-Islamic propaganda. Now, Robert Shillman, he's the billionaire founder of Cognex Corporation. He sits on the board of, wait for it, Friends of the IDF. That's the name of the organization he is on the board of. Now, the Turning Point USA connection, Shillman was the same person who confronted Charlie Kirk about turning on Israel in his last days and canceled his multi-million-dollar donations for Turning Point USA because they were not being pro-Israeli enough. And this happened, of course, coincidentally, perhaps, or perhaps not, just days before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. So let's go through the all-star cast of who has received a Shillman Fellowship for being trained in anti-Islamic propaganda. Some of them are older folks, but we'll see that there's a new generation, a new crop of people that are coming up. Robert Spencer, okay, the person who brought you Jihad Watch, his entire career has been trying to make Islam seem violent and lie about Islam. A certain Joe Kaufman, who is based in Florida. And this was the first time I had come across this individual because I don't really go to Florida much. And he has been very busy in Florida when it comes to bullying the Muslim community and bullying anybody who wants to even talk to the Muslim community, or a hotel that wants to host an event where the Muslim community is there. And he regularly follows and has developed this type of playbook that we're going to see has been taken up by newer faces and younger faces. So the playbook is this: you identify a target, usually a Muslim speaker or somebody who wants to host an event for Muslims, because our money is as green as anybody else's. And then comes the smear campaign. So Kaufman writes accusations without evidence, either vague evidence or non-existent evidence, with the same type of language that all of these fake propagandists use. Language like terror ties, radical, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas linked, with no corroboration of any of these claims. That just because they say that you have a link to terrorism or that you have a link to Hamas, all of a sudden it means that. And they can always hide behind, it's like, well, reported, alleged. Yeah, you're the ones that are doing the reporting and the alleging. You're the people who are calculating this rhetoric for fear and providing either unfalsifiable claims or things that are just ridiculous or just mostly lying through your teeth. Once that is done, then they pressure institutions. Here come the emails and the calls and the threats, and we're going to do this to you and do that to you if you don't cancel this event, if you don't stop the Muslims from coming and having their, who knows what, probably just a bazaar or something like that. So it's coordinated outrage. It's the vocal minority that's trying to cancel. And once they force a cancellation or some sort of controversy, then of course they crow about it and they declare victory. And then they use this as proof that this is true. Why would the hotel cancel the event if they weren't dangerous? See, I told you. That's the playbook. And we'll talk about some of the people who have picked up this playbook and ran with it. And this is responsible for Sammy getting detained. But there's a next gen. These folks are kind of older, the Spencers and the Joe Kaufmans. There's a new generation that has come up. And one of them is the British far-right activist known as Tommy Robinson. And I say Tommy Robinson because Tommy Robinson is not his real name, which is a pattern. I don't know. In researching for this episode, there's a lot of shady characters that are involved that have gotten these Shillman fellowships and are engaged in anti-Islamic propaganda and pro-Israeli propaganda. A lot of them have fake names. A lot of them have aliases. Now, I wonder what they could be hiding that they would choose a fake name. I don't have a fake name. Nobody I know in my local mosque has a fake name. We don't go by one name out in public and then, have a completely different secret identity, right? This is kind of it's kind of strange. So his real name is Stephen Yaxley, or Stephen maybe Yaxley. I'm not sure how to pronounce that there. And one of the ironies of Stephen Yaxley is that he has a criminal record. The dude is a criminal. And irony of ironies, one of those offenses is immigration related. The anti-immigration guy from the UK, Tommy Robinson, attempted to illegally enter the US with his buddy's passport in 2012. I couldn't make this stuff up. I couldn't write it if I tried. Later, through the David Horowitz Freedom Center and his Shillman, we'll talk about how much money he was getting from his Shillman fellowship. They attempted to bring him to the US and meet with congressmen and talk to congressmen many times. But if you have visa violations, you're going to get your visa denied. And he was denied a visa from coming to the US. So Tommy Robinson has a criminal record that prevents him from even coming to the US. And he's complaining about immigrants, upstanding immigrants, law-abiding immigrants that are coming to the UK. Again, the irony is so rich you could cut it with a knife. But so how much money was Tommy Robinson making from his fellowship? Shillman reportedly bankrolled the fellowship for Tommy Robinson at his time with Rebel Media, Canadian outfit, on a salary of about $6,700 per month. Wow. MashaAllah. You're making a good chunk of change there for doing what you're doing. And helping him rebrand, here's another pattern, as a citizen journalist. And I want you to pay careful attention to this, because this is the common tactic. We're going to get into Laura Loomer, we're going to get into Amy Meckelberg, and posturing as a citizen journalist. When you have no journalistic credentials, you are not a journalist, and you lie through your teeth. What they're trying to present themselves as is just, we're just good Samaritans, we're just citizen journalists. They are not. They are paid propagandists by pro-Israeli organizations that are made and trained to smear Islam. That's what it is. Let's move on to another Shillman recipient, or Shillman Fellowship recipient. Let's say that 3 times fast. Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer, in her own words, proudly admits that she got her start in politics by being paid by Zionist billionaire Robert Shillman as a Shillman Fellow. Loomer worked as an activist and contributor for several ignominious outfits such as Project Veritas, the Geller Report, Rebel News, which Tommy Robinson was also part of, and InfoWars. Now, at her time with Project Veritas, she became known for doing stunts. And this is kind of where you see the intergenerational handoff happening, where the older generation, they rely on print media, they rely on hit pieces, on online dossiers, articles. Loomer was doing videos, and that was new. In 2015, she used a concealed camera to record a conversation with Barry University officials. She was staging it. She basically said that she wanted to start a club, a student club that was going to be in support of ISIS. And of course, she's trying to catch people and do this sort of thing. So that was one stunt. Another stunt the very next year in 2016, she dressed in a burqa and requested a ballot under the name of Huma Abedin. If you remember Huma Abedin, a very secular, person from a Muslim family. I don't know her faith or her level of observation or practice. That was key to the Clinton campaign, to the Hillary Clinton campaign. So these types of stunts is what she became famous for. Now in 2020, she decides to run for Congress, of course, because with such a illustrious career, that's the next logical step. Florida's 21st congressional district. Who supports her? Who funds her campaign? Robert Shillman. Wow, she's really in debt to this Robert Shillman guy who's on the board of Friends for the IDF, isn't she? Robert Shillman and his wife, June Shillman, donated the maximum allowable amount of direct donations, $11,200, to Loomer's 2020 campaign. Thankfully, she lost. Now, again, here's another pattern that I want you to notice. We mentioned that Tommy Robinson has an extensive criminal background. Well, Laura Loomer also has a lot of things that she can't do. So she has been banned from Uber and Lyft. In 2017, she was banned by both Uber and Lyft after complaining that she could not find a non-Muslim driver. I find that hilarious, and suggesting creating a new ride-sharing company that did not employ Muslims. Do you see how pro-Israeli people, they don't actually want freedom or equality? They actually want to discriminate. Like, they want to say that Israel is not an apartheid state, yet they want to make the United States into an apartheid state, where now we have Muslims who are second-class citizens that were completely excluded from certain companies. So we have a pattern of criminality that we're seeing here with some of these pro-Israel, anti-Muslim influencers. She's been banned from Facebook, Instagram, PayPal, GoFundMe, Venmo, and Medium. She was even banned from the Conservative Political Action Conference in 2019 after aggressively confronting reporters. She had her press credentials revoked during trial for harassing the defendant's family. The FBI has banned her from owning a firearm due to her mental health history. This is my favorite one, this one coming up. She sued CARE, alleging that they conspired with Twitter to get her banned off of Twitter. And the lawsuit was thrown out because it was a complete lie based off of just conspiracy, complete fabrication. And in 2021, the U.S. magistrate judge ordered that Loomer and her company pay CARE money. So they had actually, I'm sure that really bothers her to this day, that she had to pay CARE, reimburse CARE for $120,000 of attorney's fees. But Laura Loomer, despite her unhinged background and her ignominious career, has a lot of influence. And that's the concern here. In early April 2025, she had an Oval Office meeting with President Trump. During this meeting, she presented a list of officials that she told Trump were insufficiently loyal to his agenda. Within 24 hours of this meeting, the administration fired the director of the NSA, his deputy, and several National Security Council staffers. Okay, it could be a coincidence, but she publicly took credit for these firings, including the assistant U.S. attorney, a CIA senior executive, and the NSA's top lawyer. So she's online bragging about the type of influence and infiltration that she has. Recently, in August 2025, the U.S. Department of State suspended all visitor visas from Palestinians, or let's just say for Palestinians from Gaza, following Loomer's public criticism. Now, these are children, amputees, people who need dire medical aid that are coming from Gaza due to the United States support of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And Laura Loomer is calling these children who need medical aid Islamic invaders. And her agitation, basically, was one of the reasons why the U.S. Department of State suspended these visitor visas. Of course, Loomer most recently was behind the detention of Sami Hamdi. She posted, quote, "Scoop, jihadists arrested at San Francisco International Airport while attempting to travel to Florida." Again, they can say whatever they want and lie through their teeth, and there's never any consequences for these people that, prove that Sami ever did anything violent or called to violence. You can't find it. It doesn't exist. Sami, in addition to myself, we have very public lives, hundreds of hours of content. If you had something real, you would know it and it would be everywhere. You don't have anything. You have to rely on innuendo and lying. Now, this was coordinated with a certain Amy Meckelberg, who goes by Amy Meck on social media, who coordinated this campaign against Sami. Let's talk about Amy Meckelberg. Again, here's another pattern. She goes by Amy Meck, and initially her Twitter account was anonymous. If you want to do something that's based off of truth and that's this moral thing, why are you anonymous, or why are you hiding your name? Are you afraid that people are going to realize that you have a Jewish heritage if you are known by Meckelberg? Why would you change it to Amy Meck? Again, you see these people, Tommy Robinson and friends, they all have aliases, they all have suspicious backgrounds, many of them have criminal pasts. It's very, very strange. Now, Meckelberg started her Twitter account in 2013, and she averaged 25 tweets a day. That's a lot. You're very online if you're making 25 tweets a day. That's 4 years later, she had amassed 200,000 followers. Most of it was anti-Islamic propaganda, a lot of memes, stuff like that. In 2018, her identity was exposed, so she was anonymously spreading her filth until 2018. Huffington Post journalist Luke O'Brien successfully identified who she was, and following her identity reveal, noticed the types of people who came out to support her. Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer, and of course, her buddy Laura Loomer. On Islam, she has reportedly referred to Islam as a pervert cult. She calls herself a modern-day crusader. She has advocated for banning mosques in the United States, right? Because we don't have this thing called the First Amendment that prevents, such things from happening. Again, pro-Israeli people do not care about the Constitution. They do not care about the rights and freedoms that are embedded in the U.S. Constitution and rights of this country. They want to establish an apartheid society. That's what Zionists want, whether it's in Palestine or whether it's here. She promoted theories that former President Barack Obama was an illegal alien, quote unquote, and supposedly connected to jihadist movements. Of course, Obama became the king of drones. He became someone who was very much involved in surveilling and antagonizing the Muslim community. These people can lie, and they can never be held accountable or have any consequences for their lies. The world just moves on, and everybody forgets about it. Meckelberg does have a global reach, though, just like Loomer and her ilk, has been banned from several places. Meckelberg's accounts are banned in France and Germany due to her postings. Again, we see that pattern of criminality and stepping outside of what is acceptable. She founded an organization known today as the RAIR Foundation, as RAIR. Now, originally when she founded it, it was an acronym for Resistance Against Islamic Radicals. Very creative. And the original mission was, quote, to stop the jihadi infiltration of our American communities. Again, that's that main message that the pro-Israeli lobby wants to hit on. Now, later, that was a bit too hard. And so she rolled it back and she renamed the organization Rise, Align, Ignite, Reclaim, which I think she hopes is more subtle. Meckelberg is the founder and editor-in-chief. RAIR brands itself as, quote, a grassroots movement to reclaim the republic from globalists and Islamic radicals. RAIR Foundation has received millions of dollars in funding from the Adelson family, or Adelson, I'm not sure which way you pronounce that. That is a notorious family, Miriam Adelson, one of the staunchest supporters of Israel, heavily involved in buying politicians and influencing them, her deceased husband as well. The Family Foundation, of course, is a pro-Israeli foundation that funds causes advancing Israeli government policies and has one of its main aims the Israeli annexation of the West Bank. I don't know, maybe her funding has something to do with her politics. The Adelson/Adelson family identified as the largest private donors, among the largest private donors to groups focused on countering Islam and spreading anti-Islamic propaganda. They've given millions between 2014 and 2019. Mecklenburg frequently defends figures like Robert Shillman of the Shillman Fellowship fame and the sitting board member of Friends of the IDF, and organizations such as Friends of the IDF. They amplify the narratives and give sympathetic coverage to such people. Her partner in crime is Chris Gaubatz, not sure how to pronounce that. That's the organization RARE's president. Gaubatz is famous for having infiltrated CARE under false pretenses. He pretended to be a Muslim and infiltrated CARE in order to supposedly prove that CARE was this radical Muslim jihadist group, which is hilarious because if you're in the Muslim community, you know CARE is anything but that. No offense to CARE, but they're very very friendly, and they don't have enough ambition. Perhaps maybe they can deal with some more ambition. But to Gaubatz, he claims that CARE is a bunch of suit-wearing jihadis. That's a quote. Whose ideology is, quote, indistinguishable from that of Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State. Wow. Okay. And that is the thing that we've seen in Israeli propaganda time and time again. They want to draw a straight line between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, anybody who wants to oppose the Israeli genocide or Israeli government's apartheid state, and then anybody in the United States or worldwide that speaks out against the Israeli genocide or the apartheid state. They're all Hamas and they're all ISIS. That's what they would like to have you believe. In fact, he said, and he said it very clearly himself, quote, "There is no such thing as radical Islam, only Islam," end quote. That means that he thinks that all Islam must be radical and violent. Previously, he served as the vice president of Understanding the Threat, another one of these outfits like Jihad Watch. They're all a self-referential community and bubble. RARE, David Horowitz found, Freedom Center, Middle East Forum, Jihad Watch, Campus Watch. They're all self-referential, and they create this cacophony where they all cite each other, they all refer to each other, and they make it seem as if there's something of substance to what they claim. In reality, it's all self-referential. Another interesting thing, and this may be a later episode, is that they translate. RARE Foundation translates Israeli and Indian content into English for American audiences. That's weird. If you're America first or you believe in reclaiming the Republic, why are you translating Israeli and Indian articles? And why do you claim that India's policies against Muslims are a good model for quote-unquote defending civilization? Mecklenburg became very famous with the Epic City hoax. Mecklenburg posted about a Muslim housing development in Texas, led by Epic Mosque, and she was calling it a Sharia city. So, oh my gosh, ring the alarm bells, Sharia city coming to Texas. And she got the attention of Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who reposted Mecklenburg's video and claimed that the development was, quote, the epicenter of a strategic and coordinated effort to Islamicize Texas. We're just trying to give you guys biryani and shawarma, right? That's really all it is. Senator John Cornyn, is that how you pronounce it, requested a federal investigation into the housing development, citing concerns about Sharia law. The U.S. Department of Justice opened a federal civil rights investigation into the planned housing development, which was known as Epic City. All of this because of this pro-Israeli, anti-Islamic, trained person who is spreading her propaganda and lies on the internet. Look at what they're able to trigger, how far they've infiltrated, and how much influence they have over the government that they can trigger these things. Of course, ultimately, the Department of Justice ended its investigation in June 2025, finding no evidence to support the allegations. It was a hoax. It was a lie. But Mecklenburg will continue to spread her lies because she's never held accountable. She never has to face any consequences for lying about people, saying this is terror-linked this and radical this and extremist that. She just continues to lie and move on to the next lie, trying to scare more and more people. And that includes against people like Sammy and myself, that if you go through her Twitter, and the last couple months she has several things about me as well. There's a couple really, really interesting things about this. Okay, one is that we all see that the playbook is the same. The funders are the same. They all claim that you have ties and links and you're a radical, you're an extremist, you're linked to these groups, when in fact, the people that are actually linked to groups abroad are them. Okay, and this is one of the important things about exposing the funders and the networks that are behind them. Who are the people that have funds to foreign powers? Mecklenburg, Tommy Robinson, Laura Loomer, all of them have ties to Israel. All of them have ties to foreign powers and foreign money. Now, I think that one thing that is also important to recognize here is that I think they made a mistake. They are a little bit too confident and a little bit too arrogant, and they underestimate how the truth will come out. And if they think for a second that they're going to intimidate the likes of me or the likes of Sammy, I'm telling you right now, we want all the smoke. We are ready. We want all the smoke. We can tell me the time and place to show up, and we can both pray to God Almighty. I challenge them, actually. Let's meet in the same place and pray to God Almighty to bring down God's curse and punishment upon the person who is lying and the person who has foreign ties. Because I guarantee you it's not me. And I know who it is. That these people are tired, and they've been repeating the same thing over and over and over again. People are starting to see through it, and people are waking up. Now, Mecklenburg is older than me. Loomer is around a similar age as I am. Israel recognizes the need to get into Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and so they have developed this Israel-aligned influencer network. So the Israeli government has established a paid influencer network known as the Esther Project to promote pro-Israeli messaging and improve its public image among declining global support. Gee, wouldn't it be easier to stop genocide and apartheid? No, apparently we have to put hundreds of millions of dollars into lying. Let's lie harder. Let's lie better. Let's lie harder. This initiative is managed by a U.S. firm called Bridges Partners, LLC, and it involves paying American social media influencers to create content across platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. They think the world is for sale. They think that you can buy anything. They think that you can buy the truth. Falsehood will perish. I guarantee you. God Almighty said in the Qur'an, وَقَدْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلَ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. What is false will fall. It will crumble, and it will crumble hard. And what is true will prevail. And there have been enough opportunities to turn back, but it doesn't seem like they're going to learn their lesson. Now, this particular project, Esther, it is financed by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Contracts show up in that go up to $900,000 in payments for the influencer campaign. And this $900,000 that's put aside for this influencer campaign is part of a larger publicly declared diplomacy budget of $150 million that was allocated in late 2024. Now, if you're an individual influencer, you will get paid $7,000. Again, it's subhanAllah. I think about what I make in a month. Tommy Robinson is making much more than that. And then the individuals who post in support of Israel get paid $7,000 a post, with the initial cohort of these influencers around 14 to 18 content creators that are expected to produce 25 to 30 pieces of content every month. Interestingly, the intervention that happened at Charlie Kirk at the Hamptons in New York, this was one of those types of influencer gatherers where Charlie was basically berated and pulled aside for not being pro-Israeli enough. And after that, that was when Shulman took out money, removed and retracted his donation from Turning Point USA. The goals of this project are obviously to counter any critical narratives about Israel's military actions and their shady state that does shady things all over the world, particularly for younger audiences. Netanyahu has met with influencers, you've all seen the videos at this point, emphasizing that social media is a crucial eighth front in the effort. He's telling everybody in front of cameras that he's going to lie to people and he's going to pay people to lie for him. Do you really think that people are dumb? Do you really think that people are that stupid that they're not going to see through and that the truth will not prevail? It's as if these people don't believe that God exists. The management, we said that the campaign is managed by the Bridges Partners that claim that they are promoting cultural interchange between the U.S. and Israel. There's another firm involved, Clock Tower X LLC, was also hired by the Foreign Ministry to manage a separate AI-driven PR push. So what's the end game here? Okay, let's bring this in and bring this to a close. it's not just about the lies, okay? But it's also about the punishment, okay? That they are not happy to simply sit back and spread false information and try to buy the truth. But they will punish as harshly as possible anybody who stands in their way. And the recent ordeal with Sammy proved that. By the way, I forgot to mention, Laura Loomer and Amy Meckelberg are liars when they take credit for it and say that Sammy has been deported. Sammy has not been deported. He was released and he is allowed to come back and apply for another visa. And I hope that he does. And I hope he goes back on another tour that has 3 times the amount of people that listen to him speak. And I hope that it's all over social media and that Amy Meckelberg and Laura Loomer have to bite on their knuckles out of rage, because it's not true that they won anything. In fact, you've only achieved a setback for yourself. This is going to backfire major. And you will see that. You will regret the day when you went after folks like Sami Hamdi. So it's not just about spreading lies. It's also about punishing. And the whole idea of revoking your visa magically overnight is part of a larger pipeline that they are trying to achieve. Listen up. This is extremely important. Look at the Mamdani campaign. One of the things that happened when Mamdani was getting very, very popular and after he won, several Republican lawmakers and right-wing groups have publicly demanded that the Department of Justice initiate denaturalization proceedings against Mamdani. Now, what does that mean? It means he's a citizen. He's not a birthright citizen. He came here as not a citizen. He came here legitimately as a legal immigrant, and then he was naturalized as a citizen. They want to be able to take away his citizenship, essentially because he is critical of Israel. And who were the people who introduced this? Andy Ogles from Tennessee and Randy Fine. Randy Fine, who is a proud former member of the IDF and somebody who has the Israeli flag probably above the American flag in his office. Okay, so that's one thing. So the denaturalization of people who have naturalized as citizens. Again, pro-Zionist group, they do not care about rights. They don't care about laws. They only cheat to win. They will do anything that it takes to get what they want or to crush their opposition. There was a bill. A lot of people didn't learn about it. It's called HR 5300, the Department of State Policy Provisions Act. It was proposed this year and eventually withdrawn. It was proposed by another ignominious person, Representative Brian Mast of Florida, another super Zionist person who laughs about the death of children in Gaza and things of this nature. They proposed a bill, and within the bill, there was a part of the bill that would give the Secretary of State unilateral authority to deny or to revoke passports for individuals who have been determined to have provided material support to a foreign terrorist organization, okay? All of these terms are purposely vague in order for them to functionally punish whoever is criticizing Israel. That they will try to say, if you criticize Israel and what they are doing, they will say that you are a Hamas supporter, you support a foreign terrorist organization, and your speech and whatever, and they're trying to constantly expand that definition so that it applies to the things that you say, and that even criticism of Israeli military policy might one day, they hope, become considered and acknowledged as supposedly material support. So this is the game, that they are trying to create new levers to pull, new buttons to push, to disenfranchise, to take away citizenship, to trample upon all of your rights in order just to stop people from speaking the truth and stop people from criticizing them. That's it. It's complete cancel culture on steroids. And now this provision in this law, the idea of stripping people of their passports, was so controversial and produced so much backlash that it eventually got taken out. In September, it was removed, which killed that particular measure. And the current version of this bill does not contain that provision that has to do with passport revocation or anything like that. But that's not to say that they're not going to try it again. In fact, we know that they're going to try it again. Now, let's be clear on one thing. This is not to say that there is no such thing as a bad Muslim anywhere in the world, or that no Muslim has committed any acts of violence that we would condemn or that should be condemned. This is not what we're saying. Muslims are like any other group of people. There are good people and there are bad people. But the pro-Israeli lobby and the anti-Islamic propaganda is all geared to make you think that Islam is uniquely violent somehow, that Muslims are uniquely violent, that our faith, that just, it calls to this. And all of the lies about the Qur'an and about jihad and about this and about that, they're all geared to make you think that Islam is a threat and that Muslims are a threat. The FBI's own documentation and own studies show that this is just a lie. That when it comes to the populations that are the most threatening, that are involved in the most terrorist activity and involved in the most violent crimes, it's not Muslims. It's not. So all of this propaganda, and this is where it comes back to the main point here. Their one silver bullet, their last line of defense when they commissioned Stagwell to run the numbers and to test the messaging, the single best messaging, or the most effective, let's say, to try to claw back what little credibility and legitimacy and sympathy that Israel could potentially claw back after slaughtering children, starving them, making them line up for food and then shooting them on purpose for 2 years or longer. The only message that does any work in light of their crimes is to scream terrorism, is to scream jihad, is to scream Islamic violence. That's all they have. That's the only card in their hand. That's the last trick up their sleeve. That's the only thing they have to rely on. And so when they're saying that, we hope that the people of America and the people of the West wake up to this reality that this is just another situation of the boy who cried wolf, that they're going to keep on using this fear tactic, which has no basis in reality. We have seen the very sophisticated funding and the very sophisticated organizations and these citizen journalists, and they're all self-referential, and it's an entire push, and they will pay you, and they will organize trips for you. They'll get you speaking tours. They will make your life very, very pleasant in order to perpetuate this lie that it is a falsehood that is supported by lots of money. It's not organic whatsoever. We believe as Muslims that the truth will prevail. But our plea is also for people to wake up and to see through this and to stop it. That if people like Mecklenburg and Loomer and the people who are willing to lie, if they're not stopped, then they're coming for your rights. They're coming for your rights to criticize foreign nations. They're coming for your right to speak the truth. And they might even come for your passport. Now, if they're targeting Muslims, you might say, well, that doesn't affect me right now. But they're coming for us first because we've been dehumanized for decades and decades through their channels of propaganda. If we don't stop them now together, they might come for you next.